Welcome to Aurigny on the Airwaves, a podcast series with me, James Filleul, which takes you behind the scenes of Guernsey's airline, Aurigny. Join us as we meet the dedicated people who make the airline soar, giving the Guernsey community a deeper look into the organisation and its operations. So today I'm with Dave Cox. Dave is the head of ground operations and also the deputy chief operating officer for Aurigny. Dave, welcome to the podcast series. Just start off by telling us a bit about yourself, how you got into aviation, where are you from, what's your background?
James, thanks for having us here today. So aviation's always been in my blood. As a young child, my father was a pilot, so I spent my life moving around here, there and everywhere as he got a flying job at various different locations. So I've always loved aeroplanes, always loved to go and look at aeroplanes. As growing up, you'd literally see me at the end of a runway watching cool stuff like that. When I left college, I was in Jersey at the time, and when I left college, I wasn't quite clear on what career path I wanted to take. I knew I wanted to be within the aviation industry, but at the time I wasn't quite sure where. So I actually took up a part-time job in 2004 with Aurigny on the check-in desk, and that was back in those days. It was trial and errors, it was pen and paper. You know, the good old days before the regulations really became a lot stricter than as they are today. That kind of grew into an area of, right, okay, I've done check-in now, what can I do next? So I went to ticket sales. At that point, I was like, right, I want to do something more. So I went out to the loading of the aircraft. So as this progressed, I basically worked my way through various different roles, essentially loading, ticket sales, check-in. Then we moved up to compliance auditor. So at that point, it was then doing our own internal compliance around the processes and procedures, but I did that as a bolt-on to the normal day-to-day work. I then progressed up to a duty manager role, so that role essentially oversees the day-to-day operation of that particular shift at that point. So it's making sure that, you know, aircraft depart on time, it's making decisions. Whilst it's not a senior role, you're still making operational decisions, working with the operations department, for example. After a bit more period of time, I became the station manager in Jersey. So it was a relatively small team. We had about 8 of us on the ground there, and we looked after the inter-island basically. So, you know, it was a really core bit of our business in terms of the inter-island travel. So we had a very bespoke operation that, you know, I think one of the best and fondest memories is regularly seeing the same people come backwards and forwards, and you build that rapport, and you know, it really made the job worthwhile. It was more than a job. You know, you actually became part of the family. As they come through, you stop and you'll have a chat with them for 10-15 minutes. So, you know, that side of things, it's a really personal touch, and because it was such a small team, it was a really, really great place to be, and everyone that I worked with there was brilliant. So I was a station manager there up until 2014, where the, you know, competition and things like that does create a challenging environment operationally, particularly with the funding of flying. It's not cheap when you look at getting an aircraft in the air and what it takes to get an aircraft in the air. So we obviously had the competition on the route that essentially led us into a position where we had to make, or the seniors had to make a rather fundamental decision for the right of Guernsey. At that point, I moved my role from Jersey to Guernsey, and I took over the station in Guernsey. Part of the chance of that was essentially to restructure it, bring it basically in line and get it functioning in a much more smoother environment. So I took that project on, a few years work into that, and we got that into a really good shape. And I continued in that role, still doing my compliance for a period of time. Then I moved into, at the time it was a deputy ground operations manager. So that was then starting to support the then ground operations manager with the network-wide pieces of work, and our network was mainly focused on the UK. So it was fairly straightforward. So we did that for a few years, and then I moved into what was then the ground operations manager role. So I then took the role on full and did the full UK kind of
So
operation.
It sounds like you progressed through most roles behind the scenes, or as in not in the air for Aurigny.
Absolutely, yeah. So, my background is very heavily on ground. Now, in my own time, I did get my private pilot's license. So I had that understanding of aircraft, how they fly, what's required, decision-making, navigation, that sort of thing, which actually on the side put me in a really good stead for being into a management role within Aurigny, because you get to understand the limitations that the guys operate to, whilst commercial is far, far more intense.
Yeah.
As a private pilot, you tend to fly in nice weather and things like that. But, there are times where during your training where they say, right, okay, you're in a situation, for example, where the clouds come in, you've got stuck in it, you need to get yourself out of it. And it's all well and good with an instructor next to you, because you've got someone who's commercially rated that can get you out of it if you need to. But it sets your mindset up to understanding the pressures the crew are under.
Yeah.
Particularly when we see foggy days in Guernsey, and everyone's like, I want to go, and we all want you to go. There's no one within the organisation anywhere that doesn't want this to run smoothly. So we sit there and we've got limits we operate to. Those limits are fairly strict, extremely strict in terms of regulation. So whilst we do that, it's just as frustrating as for the customers.
So is that customer care, is that obviously the role you do is wide ranging, is that the most important part of what you do? If you had to put your finger on the kind of central part of it?
For me, it's safety. So I'm what's known as a post holder. So in order for an airline to have an operating certificate, it's got to have nominated persons in specific roles. So flight operations, ground operations, safety and compliance, and training for flight ops are all post holder roles, and they're actually, you have to be accepted by the UK CAA to hold that role. So whilst the company can put that person forward, if they can't demonstrate that they've got the knowledge and the ability with the right attitude, ultimately, then they will not sign or authorise that person to be in that position.
Okay, so essentially your role is about a lot of things, but mainly it's about the safe operation of the airline and its flights. Yeah. Okay, no problem. All right. I mean, we've spoken a bit there about customer care and about some of the changes that you've been able to make on the ground. Can you just try and summarise some of those? Because I think Aurigny's been trying to move forward there with its ground customer care.
Absolutely. So one of the most recent projects we've done, in fact there's two recent projects we've done. The first one is the introduction of AviRamp. So Aurigny as a whole is working closely with its airport partners, so Guernsey Airport. Obviously probably the majority of our business departs Guernsey. So it's been about getting the assisted travel into a much better place. Everyone travelling should be able to travel at ease.
So what is AviRamp? How does that work?
So an AviRamp, essentially, those of you who've travelled with us will know that the steps on the ATR aircraft are particularly steep. An aircraft is a bit like a seesaw, you could say, where the balance of it, depending on where people are sat and the bags are distributed, it kind of moves backwards and forwards if you use, for example, the main landing gear as the pivot point. So as everyone gets on and moves to the front of the aeroplane, the nose oleo, which is essentially the suspension for the front wheel, compresses, which means the stairs get steeper. Mm-hmm. And then as it balances out, they then come back down again. So, when you're next travelling, have a look at the ATR door on one that's closed, and you'll see a little roller on the thing, just a little kind of bubble that sticks out. And that's designed essentially to move with the aeroplane as the weight moves. So, when you look at the ATR, the steps, and, you can see it with any aircraft with stairs, it's about how easy it is to do stairs versus a ramp. Okay. For us, we recognise, and we worked with Graham Caulfield at AviRamp, who's the CEO of AviRamp recently, and we did a piece of work around it. And the purpose of it is one airline asked him, we need a ramp. And that's essentially blown up into an 800 airport strong portfolio for them now. And we recently introduced them into Guernsey with the help of Guernsey Ports, and we're looking to do the same in Southampton and Gatwick. And it's about offering step-free access to the aircraft. So those who struggle with steps, it could be someone travelling on crutches, for example, it gives them the independence to actually be able to get onto the aircraft without being put on a chair and lifted manually up, or using equipment that's tight and so on and so forth. So it makes the aircraft a lot more accessible for everyone, not just those assisted, but families as well. So families travelling with young children with steep steps and things like
Yeah.
that. It's about finding and doing the right thing for Guernsey and the people of Guernsey to ensure that we give the accessible travel as best as possible, taken into that consideration.
Speed of turnaround is also important, though, right? Because obviously in Guernsey Airport, you're turning around a lot of aircraft quickly. What have you been able to do there to try and speed up some of those turns?
Yeah, so one of the restrictions we have is obviously the opening hours of Guernsey Airport are what they are. We can operate between 6:30 in the morning and 9 o'clock at night. For us as an airline, having an aircraft in the air is making money. When you're operating in those sorts of restrictions, it obviously restricts what you can do. So we get to a position where we need to do as much as possible with that asset to essentially make the money come in to be able to support those destinations. Now, in doing so, we'd operate, give or take, 8 sectors a day on each airframe. So we have a fleet of 5 ATRs, and 4 of those are essentially committed to flying. And then the 5th is essentially a tech spare. So
8 sectors being 8 flights, effectively.
Correct, yeah. So we'll operate, a Guernsey to Gatwick is 1 sector.
Yep.
A Gatwick to Guernsey is 2 sectors. To be able to fit that in with the destinations and the times and the slots, and there's a lot of moving parts when it comes to scheduling aircraft. It'd be great to say actually we're just going to cherry pick and go where we want when we want. Can't work like that.
So is this about speeding up boarding, perhaps, getting passengers through the system more quickly?
Exactly. So what that essentially pushes us to doing is a 30-minute turnaround is the minimum ground time. What we do schedule is 35 to 40 minutes because we need to factor in crew breaks and things like that. But if we are running late, then basically it's all systems go. Everyone works exceptionally hard to make this 30-minute turnaround happen. Now, during that 30-minute turnaround, there's a lot going on. Obviously, we've got the safety protocols, how to handle the aircraft. So, what you'll see when an aircraft arrives on stand is there's some wheel chocks placed, and then there's a red flashing light, which we call the beacon. That indication to us is that the aircraft's either live or is about to become live. So, in ground handling terms, if you see that light up, get away from the aeroplane because something's about to happen that you're not expecting. So we would then wait for that light to extinguish. We'd then at that point put cones around the aircraft. Now, the reason we put cones around the aircraft is to identify the extremities of points, so the front of the engines, the end of the wingtips, the nose and the tail, depending on the stand, so the parking area configuration. And that's to prevent collisions of ground equipment. So there's a lot of ground equipment moving around the aircraft during the turnaround process. It could be a fuel truck, it could be a catering truck, it could be an assistance vehicle, it could be an AVI ramp, baggage trailers.
So there's a lot going on the apron that you see. What about inside the terminal? I mean, you often see a lot of digital changes now in the airport.
Yeah, so one thing we're working heavily towards is online check-in. And the reason for that is it actually speeds up the process of being able to process you through the airport. So the use of those who have travelled recently will see that we've implemented kiosks to check those customers' baggage in at the moment. We are exploring the software on it to see if we can develop it a bit further to allow check-in to happen there as well. But the average processing time on the kiosk is around about 1 minute 30. The average processing time of using a conventional desk is around about 2 minutes 50. So when we look at those numbers, one of the pinch points that we do have is first wave. So first wave is essentially the 4 flights that leave between 6:30 and 7 o'clock in the morning. If we can get that right, then we know the day's relatively on track because that's the biggest pinch point that we have operationally. So we were kind of trying to come up with ways to process customers and get them into a position that allows them to either self-check-in, self-bag drop, get the injection of the bag. So that's when the bag leaves the belt system into the baggage bay. So we've got those processes going on. We've also got a twilight check-in. So we recognise that the pinch point is there, check-in. So what we try and do is move it now to the night before.
Okay, so you're checking in the evening before travel.
Correct, and we've recently extended that actually to include the flights up to 10:30 in the morning the next day, which is really, really positive, particularly for the teams on the ground that are trying to orchestrate, you could say, the early departures to make sure each and
so
every
those digital changes are there to speed up progress through the airport. Presumably they're also more sustainable as well.
Absolutely. So the mobile boarding card or the boarding card that you can get through email essentially saves printing paperwork. So one thing we're committed to is reducing our carbon footprint in terms of paper usage. There's a lot of initiatives going on through electric vehicles. Recently, a few years ago, we changed our trainings records. So when I first came to Guernsey, 2014 it was, all of our training records were paper. And when you think about training is exceptionally comprehensive. There's at least 12 mandatory courses that we need to do before we can get anywhere near a check-in desk or an aircraft. Then there's further checks after that to say, hey, yes, you demonstrated you're competent at doing that task, and then we'll sign you off in that. That was all paper. So a training file is it's an A4 binder file that was exceptionally thick. So one of the tasks at the time that I worked with the now Guernsey station manager on was trying to get that into a digital format, and looking at what systems we're using for various other tasks within the business, and whether or not they had the capability to hold digital records and do checks. So what we've done is that's come on really well. That's now fully digital. So we will use an iPad, for example, that will then log it into a digital system instead of having to print paperwork. So yeah, really positive in that respect. And
you often see aircraft coming to stand with just one propeller turning. Is that also related to cutting carbon emissions?
Absolutely. So with the ATR, you'll probably see it more so at Gatwick. We need to leave about 2 minutes for the aircraft engine to stabilise after flight. It's just fairly normal, just to ensure the engines are looked after as best possible. So at places like Gatwick, where the taxis that little bit, so that's the manoeuvre from the runway to the gate, is a little bit longer. That aircraft will shut that engine down. Obviously, we're not burning fuel. Now, the ATR is incredibly fuel efficient anyway. When you look at the fuel burn on that aircraft compared to the Embraer when we had that, it's almost half of that basically. So in terms of emissions and eco, the ATR is an efficient aeroplane, but we cannot utilise it on one engine, which again cuts the emissions itself again. But that's more beneficial when you're seeing places like Gatwick, where you may have a bit of a wait, and places like that.
So I said that's feedback you often get from customers. I know you do get a lot of feedback from customers. What else have you been able to listen to and change?
So one of the other fundamentals I'm quite proud of actually leading the initiative on is the hand baggage change. So 5 years ago, when we took ownership of the ATR 72-600 variant, so previously to that we had the 72-500 variant. The 600 was an upgraded cabin and an upgraded flight deck, which I'm sure our head of flight operations has spoken about. The one of the key items for me was the overhead lockers were bigger. And that, you notice it when you get on, and obviously I've been knocking around with ATRs now for give or take 13, 14 years. So I've seen the evolution right the way back to the first ones to where we are today. As we got the 600 variant, obviously COVID came in and stalled a lot of the work that we were doing in terms of trying to move the business. Actually, we went into survival mode, which essentially most businesses in the island did. But the key thing is looking at the dimensions of the hand baggage and what we can achieve, and we could achieve a fair bit more than what we were offering. So I wrote the business case and presented it to the executive team and said, look, at the moment we know the hand baggage is what it is, but we can do more. There was only one limitation, which is the 55 centimetre length, and the reason for that is of the length of the lockers. If we went any larger than that, then it just wouldn't physically fit. So the proposal I put forward was let's increase the size. Now it does mean that if it doesn't fit in the gauge, it won't fit in the aeroplane because it is to the centimetre. And it was agreed that it was a good thing to do. So I led that piece of work to get the new gauges. Now we utilise that opportunity to advertise Guernsey as well. So all our airports, we have hand baggage gauges. They're there to check the compliance with it, and it's the reason I stress the reason why it is so important that we do check is if they don't fit in that box, it just won't fit in the aeroplane. And
Okay.
the last thing I need is the overhead locker being damaged, because then it will ground the aeroplane and we can't go anywhere, because again, there's very, very strict regulations around what we can depart with and what we can't.
So you've been able to make those changes, which have positively helped customers. They take bigger bags. That's obviously good for all of us. So that kind of introducing changes and aspects of the job. Give us a flavour then of what a typical day for you looks like. That's only one part, and the role is really varied. So is there a typical day? And if so, kind of scope it out for us.
So, if I look at today as a whole, the route network that we operate now is not just the UK, it's Europe. We've got Paris on a regular basis. We've got the European destinations that we do, which, are really, really good. And they are for the islander, to give them that direct travel to Europe without having to think about, I've got to stay a night in Gatwick, or, even I see it myself, I'd sooner go direct somewhere. I'd sit on an ATR for 3 hours just to not worry about going to Gatwick and getting on another aeroplane and having that stress in my life. But ultimately, so my day is very much, the first thing I do when I wake up is get onto the ops system. Where's the aeroplanes? Are they on time? Is there any big issues? One of the changes I made about 2 years ago was I changed our ops system to a much more dynamic system, so we can push alerts out when there are issues. So the awareness of any delay, for example, over an hour, actually notifies the executive team of the airline that, hey, there's something going wrong here, and it enables us to get our heads together to be able to develop and be precise in terms of the decisions we need to make to get the aircraft back on schedule or how we recover. So the first thing I do every day is always look at first wave, and then 9 o'clock in the morning I get the ground handling teams on in Guernsey to discuss what happened, if there are any delays. If there are, like this morning, the meeting took 1 minute because everything went early. So it was any problems? No. Right, great, good job everyone, let's crack on with the day. So it starts with that, and then it moves into, we have daily executive team meetings just to talk through any up-and-coming issues, strategic issues, any curveballs that may be coming our way. Then it will move on to, it could be policy writing, procedure writing, it could be analysis of performance for the ground handling stations. So, certainly one I think I track is we have a delay code, we call it in industry, which they're set industry standard delay codes, and it may be weather, it may be technical, it may be passenger convenience, it could be anything like that. So there's 100 odd codes that we can use, different things. When we have our ground handling service level agreements, so this is where we work with people like Menzies or Swissport across our network, it gives us the ability to manage those appropriately. And when we essentially, what I'll do is I'll go through, right, where are we, what delays did we have yesterday, what was the issues, and then ask for responses. So it tends to go through there. We run essentially trend analysis on the delay code, so I can see each month how many of each delay code are used and see whether we're up or down, or whether the changes we're making are effective to what we're trying to achieve. So very much performance is there. I'll also check, log into our safety system. So every airline operating has a system called a safety management system. What that does is it encourages, basically it manages risk, it manages policies and procedures, safety reporting, and it could be anything from actions from the back of a safety investigation. So we have our safety team that are independent to every other area of the business, and it's good that they're independent because it means that they can go and probe in certain areas. So
it's bringing together safety management, performance management, quality improvements for customers. In your mind, is there an example of when all of that's come together and delivered a time that you're really proud of?
I think when I look at things we've done, I think the Island Games probably when it was Guernsey 3 years ago. We knew, we are a small team in Guernsey. There's no question about it. And we geared up to manage the scheduled flights. When the Island Games came to fruition, we had thousands of extra people descending upon us on one day, sometimes two. And it was how we we could manage it essentially by getting everyone where they needed to be, as easy and as professional as possible. And the caveat to that also is we sent 2 of our aircraft out to other countries to collect teams that obviously not Guernsey, but we fly the flag on the tail, and that's a proud moment for me. To fly that flag to another country really is quite something. And we're representing not just Aurigny, but we're representing Guernsey, and we're proud. Everyone in the business is proud.
So, I mean, that's my final point, really. I mean, you could give people a flavour, I think, of what it's like to work for Aurigny. What's the business like? What are you trying to achieve? Is there a way you can summarise it?
I think if I would, I'd probably describe it as unique. If you want a 9 till 5 job, going to work in an office. If you want something that's different, that changes every day, that has an interaction skill that is different every day, and you want to work with people who are just incredible, and Aurigny's the place to be. I mean, it's full of dedicated people that are committed to delivering the product at the end of the day.
And it's not been an easy few years. You feel the business has moved on from there?
Huge amounts, yeah. Yeah, no, like I say, I've been with the organisation 21 years now. The last few years, the industry has struggled. It's not just an Aurignyism. It's there's various other airlines that have found themselves in very sticky situations and had to make some very hard decisions, similar to what we had to do last year. I'm proud to say that last year is very much behind us now, and we're moving forward into a much more stable, much more calming, a much more calmer year is definitely how I put it. Like I say, the people are dedicated, and without the people within Aurigny and the dedication to Guernsey, Aurigny wouldn't be what it is. But there is a number of examples where the team working for the airline in every area, dedicated, keen, and they just want to deliver everything on time in the best possible way.
Okay, Dave Cox, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Cheers.
Thanks for listening to Aurigny on the Airwaves with me, James Filleul. Check out the rest of this podcast series to find out more about Guernsey's airline, Aurigny.